The moon hung low over Ilarian's castle, silver light spilling through stained glass as the air hummed with expectation. The grand hall was alive with silk and perfume. Dozens of princesses draped in jewels stood in neat formation, each one trembling with hope. The lunar ceremony happened once in a generation, and tonight the moon goddess would choose the Alpha King's mate. At the far edge of the room, unseen and unimportant, Lyria adjusted a goblet on the banquet table. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked. The servants had been ordered to stay silent and invisible, yet her curiosity was impossible to cage. She risked a glance at the dais where King Alaric stood. He looked carved from obsidian, broad-shouldered, his gaze sharp, his very presence commanding stillness. "Keep your eyes down," whispered Eldrin, the palace healer, as he passed behind her. "Tonight isn't for us." "I know," she murmured, but her voice carried a tremor that betrayed her heart. Trumpets echoed. The High Priestess Mara entered, veiled in moonlight. Every torch dimmed as though bowing to her. The sacred chalice was lifted high. "The goddess will reveal the lunar by the mark," she declared, her voice echoing through stone and silence. Let no doubt stain her choice. The princesses extended their wrists, jeweled bracelets clinking. The moonlight intensified, a beam descending from the high window like liquid silver. Gasps filled the hall as the light moved among them, hovering, pausing, then drifting past the royal daughters entirely. It swept over the dais, over Alaric himself, and toward the crowd of servants. Lyria froze, her heart hammered as the light found her. The moon mark flared on her skin, bright, undeniable, shaped like a crescent burning upon her hand. She cried out softly as warmth coursed through her veins. The goblet fell and shattered on the marble floor. Every whisper in the room died. "She's a servant," hissed a noble. "A mistake," someone gasped. "She can't bear children. The healers said so." "Blasphemy," another spat. Lyria clutched her marked hand to her chest, trembling as dozens of noble eyes burned into her. She tried to hide it, but the glow only brightened. King Alaric stepped forward. His gaze met hers, startled, then searching, then unreadable. "What is your name?" His voice carried authority that left no room for defiance. "Lyria," she whispered. The High Priestess's veil fluttered. "Majesty, it cannot be her." "The goddess must have been—" "The goddess," Alaric interrupted, his tone cold as steel, "does not make mistakes." The hall erupted into chaos. Princess Sarah's jeweled hands clenched in fury. "You'll let a barren servant wear the lunar mark?" she shouted. Lyria's chest ached with confusion. She didn't understand why the goddess had chosen her. She didn't understand the strange pull between her and the king, the way his presence felt both terrifying and familiar. Guards surrounded her, the nobles shouted for her removal, priests demanded purification, and still the mark glowed brighter than the moon above. Alaric's command silenced them all. "Take her to the temple for verification," he ordered. His eyes, dark and storm-like, lingered on Lyria. "If the mark is true, no power in Ilarion will undo it." Lyria was led away through corridors echoing with whispers of disbelief. The torches flickered as she passed, shadows stretching like reaching hands. Fear gnawed at her ribs, but beneath it burned something else, an ache, a question she dared not name. Behind her, in the fading murmurs of the ceremony, King Alaric remained still. The nobles argued, the High Priestess trembled, but he stared at the place where she had stood. He felt the faint echo of her fear inside his chest, as if their hearts had brushed in silence. And somewhere deep in the endless sky, the moon goddess watched and smiled. If you've ever felt that destiny can reach even the forgotten and invisible, stay and hear how Lyria's mark changed a kingdom. Don't look away. This story has only just begun. Morning broke over Ilarion with a silence that felt unnatural. The castle's towers, once proud and serene, now bristled with rumors carried on the cold wind. Servants whispered in corners, guards exchanged uneasy glances. By dawn, the news had already spread across the capital. The moon goddess had marked a barren servant as lunar. Lyria awoke in a small stone chamber beneath the temple, her wrists bound loosely with ceremonial cloth. The mark still glowed faintly on her hand, though the pain had dulled to a steady pulse. She stared at it, disbelieving. Every heartbeat felt like an accusation. The door creaked open. Eldrin stepped in, his healer's robe dusted with ash from the ceremony fires. His face was pale. "They're saying it was an omen," he murmured. "That your mark means the goddess has turned her back on the noble bloodlines." Lyria shook her head. "I never asked for this. I don't even understand why—" "You don't need to," he interrupted, lowering his voice. "Just keep silent, Lyria. The king ordered your protection, but the council is furious. If they can prove the mark is false, they'll demand your execution for blasphemy." Her breath caught. "Execution?" "Not by the king's will," Eldrin said quickly, "but the nobles are loud, and they're afraid." Above them the palace bells rang, a summons to the Hall of Judgment. In the great hall, Alaric sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. The nobles filled the chamber like a restless storm, silk and gold gleaming under the torchlight. Princess Sarah stood among them, her chin raised in indignation. "My king," she began, her voice dripping with calculated grace, "the moon cannot favor a servant. It is an insult to every royal house in Ilarion. She deceived us, perhaps with sorcery." Alaric's gaze shifted to the high priestess. "Speak," he commanded. Mara's veil trembled as she bowed. "Majesty, we tested the mark. It is genuine. The light of the goddess lingers upon her, but such a sign has never fallen upon one of her kind. It defies order." "Order," Alaric said slowly, "is not ours to define." A murmur spread through the court. Some called it blasphemy, others prophecy. Lyria stood at the center of it all, trembling as if her very breath might break the silence. She could feel every stare, sharp, judging, venomous. A noblewoman sneered, "She's barren. How will the line of Ilarion continue?" Another man shouted, "The people will riot. They'll say the throne has been cursed." Alaric rose. The air stilled. "The people will say what they are told," he said, "and they will be told the truth, that the moon has chosen, whether we like it or not." The council erupted, voices colliding in chaos. Through the clamor, Sarah's cry pierced like steel. "You'd risk the kingdom for a servant?" Alaric's jaw clenched. He descended from his throne, crossing the marble floor until he stood before Lyria. She dared not meet his eyes. He spoke quietly so only she could hear. "You bear something you did not seek. For that, I do not blame you. But if you are truly Luna, this kingdom will test you harder than any flame." Lyria swallowed hard. "I don't want to be Luna, I just want to live." His gaze softened for an instant, only an instant. "Then survive, and the goddess will decide." He turned to the guards. "Take her to the lower quarters. No harm is to come to her. Anyone who disobeys will answer to me directly." Sarah's voice echoed behind him, trembling with fury. "You can't hide her forever." But Alaric didn't turn back. He felt the strange pull again, that invisible thread between their hearts, tightening with each step. As Lyria was led away through the whispering corridors, she heard the crowds outside chanting, half in awe, half in hatred. "The servant is marked! The servant is marked!" Inside her chest, fear fought with something unfamiliar, the smallest flicker of defiance. And above the rising noise of outrage, the moon hung pale and distant, silent witness to the beginning of her trial. The dungeon smelled of damp stone and forgotten prayers. Lyria sat against the cold wall, wrists bound with silver-threaded rope meant to subdue magic, though she had none. The faint hum of the mark on her hand was the only warmth in that hollow darkness. Outside the bars, the flicker of a single torch carved long shadows that twisted like living things. Every sound echoed. Footsteps. Voices above, the faint toll of the bell marking noon. She had been kept here for 2 days, questioned by priests who whispered that she might be a trick of the shadows. Yet even in chains, the mark refused to fade. It glowed like defiance itself. When the heavy door opened, she expected guards. Instead, it was King Alaric. He dismissed the sentry with a nod and stepped closer, his cloak brushing the ground. The scent of steel and cedar followed him. His presence filled the small chamber like a storm. "Majesty," she began, standing as far as her bindings allowed. "If this is about the mark, I swear I—" He raised a hand, silencing her. "Do you know why I came?" Lyria's throat tightened. "To decide whether I live or die." A shadow of a smile ghosted across his face. "You're bolder than I thought." "I've nothing left to lose," she whispered. For a moment, his gaze softened, then turned sharp again. "You claim innocence. Yet the goddess branded you in front of every noble in Ilarion. Why you? What makes you worthy of her favor?" "I don't know," Lyria said, the words trembling from her lips. "I've done nothing. I serve. I clean floors and pour wine. I was born with nothing, and have nothing still." She hesitated, voice breaking. "If this mark brings you shame, I'll cut my hand off before I wear it again." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Do not speak such foolishness." He moved closer until only the iron bars separated them. "The priests tell me the mark cannot be forged. If they are right, then the goddess herself chose you. That should make you the most powerful woman in this kingdom. Yet here you are, in chains. Because power doesn't change who people think I am," she said quietly. "To them I'm still a servant." The torch crackled. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Alaric studied her face, as though searching for deceit, but found none. He turned away, his voice low. "If the goddess is truly behind this, then my defiance may doom Ilarion. But if she isn't, if this is some cosmic mistake—" He trailed off, hands gripping the bars. Lyria took a step closer. "Maybe it isn't about worthiness," she said. "Maybe it's about need. Maybe the goddess saw something broken that needed mending." For the first time, the king's gaze faltered. There was a weariness in him she hadn't seen before, the kind that no crown could hide. Before he could reply, the door creaked open again. The high priestess entered, her veil silver in the dim light. "Majesty, this must end. The council grows restless. Keeping her alive invites chaos." Alaric turned, his voice sharp. "Enough. You will not question my decisions." "The moon's will is sacred," Mara countered. "But if she is truly the Luna, the goddess will protect her through trial. Let her face the temple's test. If she survives, none shall doubt her." The king's eyes darkened. "And if she fails?" "Then her death will cleanse the mark's curse," the priestess whispered. Lyria's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to beg, but Alaric's expression stopped her. He looked torn, fury and fear wrestling behind his eyes. Finally he said, "Very well, prepare your test, but if she dies unjustly, I swear by the moon your blood will pay for it." Mara bowed and left. Alaric lingered, silent. Then softly he said, "Do not give them reason to call you weak, Lyria. The world is already watching for you to break." When he turned and walked away, she whispered into the emptiness, "Then I'll have to learn how not to." Above, unseen, the moon began its rise again, pale, watchful and waiting. Night blanketed Ilarion in silver mist. The moon hung high, round and watching, as if guarding a secret it refused to speak. In the quiet corridors beneath the temple, Eldrin moved swiftly, the hem of his healer's robe brushing against ancient stone. He carried a small lantern, its flame trembling with each breath of the underground wind. He had spent 2 sleepless nights searching through the forbidden archives, chasing a rumor that haunted his thoughts, the legend of the marked barren. The scrolls were older than memory itself, their ink faded and fragile. As he unrolled another parchment, his pulse quickened. There it was, the same crescent symbol branded on Lyria's hand, drawn in trembling strokes beside the words, "She who cannot bear life will bear destiny." Eldrin froze. The prophecy wasn't a curse, it was a warning. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. He hid the scroll just as the door opened. Lyria entered, her wrists free at last, but her face pale from exhaustion. "They let you come?" Eldrin whispered, astonished. "The king allowed it," she said softly. "He said I should rest before the trial, but I can't. I had to see you." Her gaze dropped to the lantern light. "I keep dreaming of the moon. It burns and whispers my name." He sighed. "Dreams have meaning, Lyria. Sometimes more than prayers." What are you hiding from me? He hesitated, glancing toward the dark passage. You remember the old tales the servants used to tell? About the Luna who ended a war by sacrificing her power? She nodded. That story wasn't a tale, it was prophecy, and I think it's about you. Lyria stepped back, shaking her head. No, I'm not anyone's savior. I'm barely surviving. You don't understand. Eldrin unrolled the scroll, revealing the faded script. The mark chooses those who are hollow, so that the goddess may fill them. The barren are not cursed, they are vessels. Your emptiness is the reason she chose you. Lyria stared at the words, her throat tightening. But if that's true, what does it mean for me? He looked at her, his eyes dark with worry. It means your fate was written long before you were born. Silence settled between them. The lantern flickered, shadows shifting across the walls like restless ghosts. Lyria spoke at last, voice trembling. Eldrin, if the goddess really has a purpose for me, why does it feel like punishment? Because destiny rarely feels like mercy, he replied. Above them, faint bells rang through the temple, summoning the priests for prayer. Eldrin quickly rolled the scroll and hid it beneath his cloak. No one can know I found this. If the High Priestess learns of it, she'll destroy every trace. Lyria reached for his arm. You think she fears the prophecy? I think she fears losing control of it, he said. Mara serves the goddess, but she also serves power, and power never yields easily. Her fingers trembled against his sleeve. Then what should I do? For now, survive the trial. Whatever happens, remember, the moon's will is not cruelty, it's purpose, even when it hurts. Lyria nodded slowly, though her heart churned with confusion. As she turned to leave, the mark on her hand flared faintly, the same silver glow that had once filled the ceremony hall. The light pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. Eldrin's voice followed her through the corridor, low and urgent. Lyria, there's something else. The prophecy says the marked Baron will be bound to the Alpha's soul. His fate will rise or fall with hers. She stopped, the weight of his words sinking deep. Bound, not chosen, not separate. As she stepped back into the moonlight above, the realization burned through her. Whatever trial awaited, she would not face it alone. Whether the king wished it or not, their souls were already intertwined, and somewhere beyond the clouds the moon goddess whispered in a voice only the marked could hear. The bond begins where fear ends. The air inside the great hall buzzed with forced laughter and quiet resentment. A feast had been called by the council to restore peace after weeks of unrest, but everyone knew it was a performance, a show of unity that tasted of poison. Banners of moonlight silk hung from the vaulted ceiling, and hundreds of candles burned in golden pools. Yet beneath the glamour, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Lyria stood at the edge of the hall, her simple gown borrowed from the temple servants. She wasn't seated among nobles or guards. She was to observe, nothing more. The king's order had been clear. She was not to speak unless spoken to. Still, she felt the weight of every gaze, every whisper slicing through the air. She shouldn't be here, hissed a lady draped in pearls. It offends the goddess to let her near the throne. Perhaps the king wants a reminder of his mistake, another muttered. Lyria lowered her eyes, trying to drown in silence. Yet she could feel Alaric's presence even across the room. Heavy, magnetic, impossible to ignore. He sat at the high table, his crown glinting under torchlight, his expression unreadable. The High Priestess raised a silver goblet. Let us honor the goddess whose light guides Ilarion. The hall murmured in hollow agreement. Lyria's mark began to tingle faintly beneath her sleeve, the sensation both familiar and frightening. Eldrin, seated beside the lower healers, caught her glance and shook his head subtly, a warning to stay calm. But peace was never meant for this night. Halfway through the feast, Princess Sarah rose. The music faltered. Every eye turned toward her as she approached the king, her gown a cascade of crimson silk. "My king," she said sweetly, though venom laced her tone. "Since harmony seems the purpose of this night, perhaps we should celebrate by proving the goddess's will. Let the servant bless us with her presence." The hall stirred. Alaric's hand tensed around his cup. "This is not the time," he said. "But the people question her holiness," Sarah pressed. "Surely, if she is lunar, she can endure their gaze. Or does the moon choose only in darkness?" The mockery drew quiet laughter from the nobles. Lyria's heart raced. She could feel the mark burning under her skin again, brighter this time, like fire beneath flesh. The king stood, his voice steady but cold. "Enough!" But before silence could settle, a scream tore through the back of the hall. One of the servants pointed toward the corner. Flames licked the edge of the velvet drapes. In an instant, the fire leapt higher, devouring cloth and timber. Panic erupted. Guards rushed to douse it. Nobles fled from the smoke, and the high priestess cried out prayers to the moon. Lyria didn't think. She moved. A small boy, one of the kitchen helpers, was trapped beneath a fallen beam near the fire. Without hesitation, she ran toward him. "Lyria!" Eldrin shouted, but she was already in the heat. The smoke clawed at her lungs, searing her throat, yet she pressed forward. She gripped the burning wood with her bare hands, ignoring the pain, and pulled until it gave way. The boy gasped as she dragged him clear. When they emerged from the smoke, her hands were blistered, but the mark on her skin glowed fiercely, untouched by flame. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Sarah's voice failed her. The king stepped forward, eyes locked on Lyria. For a long, breathless moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "The goddess protects her." The words echoed through the hall like a verdict. Outside, the night wind swept through broken windows, carrying away the last threads of smoke. The nobles would whisper about it for weeks, the barren servant who walked through fire and lived. Lyria stood trembling, her burned hands throbbing, her heart caught between fear and something far more dangerous. Hope. Rain fell over Ilarion for 3 straight nights after the fire. The city whispered that the heavens wept for what had almost been lost. Inside the castle, the smell of smoke still lingered, clinging to the marble halls like memory. The nobles had returned to their schemes, the council to its arguments, and the king to his silence. But beneath the surface, something had changed. Lyria spent her days confined to a small chamber near the healer's wing, her hands wrapped in white linen. The burns were deep, yet the mark on her palm remained untouched, a perfect crescent glowing faintly even through the bandages. She often wondered if it was a blessing or a curse. Eldrin visited each morning, bringing herbs and words of comfort. Yet that day he carried something more, a piece of parchment worn thin by age. "I found this behind the altar of the old chapel," he said, lowering his voice. "There's an entrance beneath the castle, a hidden passage that predates the moon faith. I think the high priestess doesn't want anyone to find it." "Why tell me?" Lyria asked, wary. "Because I believe it's connected to your mark," he replied, "and because Alaric won't believe me without proof." Her pulse quickened. "The king? He's been asking questions," Eldrin said, "about the fire, about you, about the bond." Lyria turned toward the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "If he's looking for answers, he won't find them in me." "Maybe not," Eldrin said softly. "But you might find them down there." That night, she couldn't sleep. The mark pulsed again, calling her like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Finally, she wrapped her cloak tight and slipped into the corridors. The castle slept, save for the faint hum of guards' footsteps far above. Guided by memory and instinct, she reached the chapel. The moonlight poured through the broken stained glass, bathing the altar in silver. She knelt and pushed against the carved stone base. It groaned, then shifted, revealing a stairwell descending into darkness. She hesitated only once before stepping down. The air grew colder with each step, thick with dust and the faint scent of iron. The walls bore ancient carvings, symbols of the moon long before the temple's teachings. Words etched in forgotten tongue whispered of unity, sacrifice, and power, born not of blood, but of spirit. At the lowest level she found a chamber shaped like a crescent. In the center stood an old pedestal, with a cracked mirror framed in obsidian. When she approached, her reflection shimmered, and for a heartbeat she saw not herself, but a woman crowned in silver, eyes glowing with moonlight. "Who are you?" Lyria whispered. The voice that answered came not from the mirror but from within her own chest. "I am every Luna who came before you. You carry what they could not keep." She stumbled back, clutching her chest. The glow from her mark spread across her arm, lighting the carvings around the room. The walls pulsed like a living thing, and she felt the weight of centuries pressing upon her. Then another voice spoke, this one real. "So the servant dares trespass where even kings are forbidden." Lyria turned sharply. The high priestess stood at the entrance, her veil damp from the rain, her expression hard. "I was only searching for truth," Lyria said, her voice trembling. "Truth is a dangerous thing in Ilarion," Mara replied. "Some truths were buried for a reason. Whatever you found here, forget it, for your sake and his." Lyria met her gaze. "I can't. The goddess chose me for something. I feel it." "Then pray she spares you when she's done," the priestess said coldly. Mara left without another word, her footsteps echoing into silence. Lyria turned back to the mirror, her reflection still flickering between who she was and who she was meant to be. The mark on her hand throbbed once more, as if in defiance. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled, and the bond between her and the king tightened like a vow. The storm that followed refused to leave Ilarion. For 7 days, thunder rolled across the mountains like an omen. The streets below the castle filled with frightened murmurs. Some whispered that the goddess had cursed the kingdom, others that she was cleansing it. But within the palace walls, the truth was sharper and more dangerous than either. Lyria had not spoken to the high priestess since that night beneath the castle. Mara's warning still echoed in her mind, but so did the vision, that flash of the woman in silver, the whisper of destiny. The memory burned behind her eyes each time she closed them. She tried to keep to the shadows, but rumors of her visit to the old temple spread faster than wildfire. Servants stopped talking when she passed. Guards bowed stiffly but never met her eyes. The mark on her hand seemed to grow brighter each day, impossible to hide. The council demanded an audience with the king. Alaric stood at the head of the chamber, the air around him heavy with tension. "Speak," he said, his voice as calm as steel. Lord Dareth, the eldest among the nobles, stepped forward. "Majesty, the people are restless. Crops fail, storms do not end, and they say it began when the servant was marked. Her presence offends the goddess. Exile her, or risk rebellion." Alaric's gaze did not waver. "You speak of rebellion as if it is a solution, not a sin." Dareth bowed slightly. "Then perhaps we speak of survival." The murmur that followed was like a rising tide. Princess Sarah's voice cut through it. "Majesty, you've defied tradition, your council, and even the high priestess. Will you defy the goddess next?" Alaric's patience snapped. "You question me as though I do not bleed for this kingdom. Yet none of you have seen what I have, the mark upon her hand, untouched by fire. The prophecy's words are no curse, they are a calling." "The people don't believe in prophecy," Sarah said sharply. "They believe in heirs, and she cannot give you one." The room fell silent. Lyria stood just inside the doorway, having come at Alaric's summons. Every word struck her like a blade. She wanted to vanish, to escape the weight of their contempt. But Alaric turned toward her and his voice softened. "Tell them, Lyria, tell them you never sought this." She hesitated, then stepped forward. "I didn't," she said quietly. "I never wanted the mark or the crown it brings. I only want peace, and for the kingdom and for myself. But I believe the goddess chose for a reason. If that reason is to suffer, then I'll suffer. If it's to serve, then I'll serve. But I will not run." Her voice carried through the hall, fragile yet unbroken. The nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Dareth turned away first. "Faith is not enough to rule a kingdom, nor fear enough to hold one," Alaric replied. The council disbanded soon after, leaving tension like frost in their wake. As the hall emptied, Alaric approached her. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "You asked me to," Lyria reminded him. He studied her face, weary yet fierce. "They want you gone. Some will try to make it happen. You must stay within the castle walls. Do you understand?" Lyria nodded. "And if the goddess doesn't want me hidden?" For a heartbeat, His composure cracked. "Then may she protect you better than I can." Outside, lightning split the sky. The storm raged on, beating against the castle towers as if testing their strength. In the flicker of each flash, the mark on Lyria's hand gleamed like a beacon, seen from the courtyard below, whispered about by every frightened tongue. By nightfall, the kingdom had chosen sides, those who followed the king's faith in the goddess's will, and those who followed fear. And in the heart of that divide stood Lyria, not a queen, not a servant, but the fragile thread holding Ilarion's fate together. The storm finally broke, leaving Ilarion washed clean, but heavy with unease. The morning sky was pale and bruised, and the scent of wet stone filled the air. The courtyard lay silent, its fountains still and its banners limp from rain. Yet beneath that quiet tension moved unseen, the kind that made even the bravest soldiers glance over their shoulders. Lyria sat by the window in her chamber, tracing the faint glow of the mark through her sleeve. It had dimmed since the storm passed, but the ache it left within her remained. Each pulse of light felt like the beat of another heart, one that wasn't hers. When Eldrin entered, he looked more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. His eyes were ringed with sleeplessness, and his hands trembled slightly as he closed the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said. Lyria turned, uneasy. "You found something again, didn't you?" He hesitated, as if deciding how much truth she could bear. "More than I wanted to." He drew a scroll from inside his cloak, one bound with a seal of black wax, the mark of the royal archives, forbidden to all but the king. "I stole this," he admitted. "It's the original prophecy, not the one the priests teach. The true one." Lyria's voice lowered. "Eldrin, if the High Priestess finds out—" "She won't," he cut in. "Because she already knows what it says." He unrolled the parchment carefully. The ancient words shimmered faintly under the weak sunlight. "Listen," he whispered. "When the moon turns her gaze upon the hollow womb, her light shall not bless heirs but balance. Her bond shall restore what was broken, but the kingdom must choose between blood and harmony." Lyria's stomach twisted. "Between blood and harmony," she repeated. "That means—" "It means you are not meant to give him an heir," Eldrin said. "You are meant to give him peace, or ruin, depending on his choices." She shook her head, disbelief clouding her thoughts. "How can peace come from me? I can't even stand in a room without being despised." "Because peace isn't born from love," he said softly. "It's born from sacrifice, and the bond between you and the king. It's not a blessing, it's a test." Lyria turned away, staring out at the distant towers. "He doesn't believe in prophecy," she murmured. "Then he'll have to," Eldrin said, "because the mark binds him as tightly as it binds you. His strength fades when yours does. I've seen it." Lyria frowned. "What do you mean?" "I tended to him after the council meeting," the healer said. "He was pale, fevered, the same hour your mark dimmed. You two are connected in ways neither of you understands. The goddess tethered his soul to yours." Her pulse quickened. "Then if one of us falls, the other follows," Eldrin finished grimly. For a long time, silence hung between them. The air felt too thin to breathe. Finally, Lyria whispered, "You should destroy that scroll. If the council learns the king's fate is tied to mine, they'll kill me to break the bond." Eldrin nodded slowly. "I will. After he knows. He deserves the truth." She met his eyes, fear and sorrow warring inside her. "And what about me? What do I deserve?" He smiled faintly, though his voice trembled. "To survive what's coming. That's all I can hope for." Before leaving, he pressed a vial into her palm, for when the pain becomes too much, it won't stop the mark from burning, but it will let you rest. After he was gone, Lyria sat in silence, listening to the faint rhythm of her heartbeat, and somewhere deep beneath it, another heartbeat answering in perfect sync. Outside, the bells of the temple began to toll, each chime echoing like a warning. The bond was no longer a secret, and secrets in Ilarion never stayed buried for long. The dawn of the trial arrived, pale and trembling, casting silver light through the high temple's open windows. Lyria stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, her hands bound loosely, but the mark blazing on her palm as if aware of what awaited her. The murmurs of nobles and priests swirled like wind through the stone halls, but her attention was fixed on the high priestess Mara, whose veil seemed to draw the very shadows toward her. "You understand what is expected," Mara said, voice sharp and unwavering. "Step into the flames, and the moon will reveal the truth of your claim. Fail, and the goddess's judgment is final." Lyria's chest tightened. She had spent nights preparing, but preparation felt meaningless before a fire that promised to judge her soul rather than her body. Eldrin stood at the temple entrance, eyes wide, clutching a small satchel of herbs and water. He whispered, "Trust yourself. The mark will guide you." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The moment of choice arrived, and she stepped forward, the glow of the mark intensifying with each hesitant step. The circle of fire shimmered, the flames moving unnaturally, as if alive. The heat washed over her, but her skin remained untouched. Suddenly, visions assaulted her senses. She saw the Lunas of the past, women she had never known, each bearing the crescent mark in different times, different wars, different loves. Their faces were stern, sorrowful, and yet filled with resolve. Whispers in ancient tongue filled her ears. Balance, sacrifice, unity. She faltered, fear clawing at her chest. What if she was unworthy? What if she failed? The thought of the king, alone and vulnerable without her, shook her more than any flame. A voice broke through the visions, Alaric's, distant but unmistakable. "You are stronger than you know. Do not let the fear claim you." The mark pulsed violently, as though echoing his words. Strength and warmth spread through her veins, mingling with the fire around her, not burning her but tethering her spirit to the force of the goddess. Images of Ilarian's future unfolded before her. Fields parched and full, rivers flowing, people arguing, laughing and living. The vision flickered, showing chaos if the bond between her and the king broke. Her heart ached with the weight of choices she had not yet made. Lyria took a deep breath. "I accept," she whispered, voice trembling but firm. "Not for power, not for glory, but for what is right. For the people. For him." The flames responded instantly. They rose higher, brighter, circling her like a protective halo. Pain she expected did not come. Instead, a strange warmth filled her, a sense of unity, of purpose, of being exactly where she was meant to be. The mark on her hand burned with light, connecting her to the king, to the goddess, to the destiny written centuries before her birth. Time seemed to stretch. The visions faded, the whispers ceased, and the circle of fire dimmed to a gentle glow. Lyria stood breathing heavily, her body untouched, yet transformed in ways she could not name. The high priestess Mara stepped forward, veil lifted slightly. Her eyes studied Lyria, unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "The moon speaks through you. You have survived the trial and earned the mark. None shall doubt your claim again." The gathered nobles and priests released a collective murmur of astonishment. Princess Sarah's lips parted in disbelief, her hands clenching the folds of her gown. Lyria's gaze swept the hall, and her eyes met Alaric's. Relief and awe flashed across his features, mingled with an emotion she couldn't yet name. Their bond, invisible to all but the moon and those marked, had endured. Eldrin stepped forward, whispering, "You did it. You've passed." Lyria lowered her eyes, heart pounding, voice quiet but resolute. "The trial is over, but the path ahead has only begun." Above, the moon hung still, pale and serene, as if watching and approving, the faint glow of its light reflecting upon the mark that had survived fire, fear, and doubt. The hall was silent, heavy with expectation. Lyria stood before King Alaric, the faint glow of the mark pulsing on her palm. The trial had ended, yet tension clung to the air like fog. Nobles shifted in their seats, unsure whether to bow or flee. Even the high priestess Mara watched, veil lifted, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Alaric's eyes were fixed on Lyria. There was no anger, no pride, only a storm of thought and feeling swirling behind the dark depths of his gaze. "You have survived what none of my daughters dared," he said quietly. "The moon has spoken through you. The council may whisper, but their words cannot undo the truth. Lyria's pulse raced. "Majesty, I—" "You do not need to speak," he interrupted, stepping closer. The room seemed to shrink around them as if the walls themselves held their breath. "The choice I must make is not about the council or the nobles or even the prophecy. It is about the future of Ilarion. And my own heart." The hall waited. Even the murmurs of the gathered crowd fell silent. Princess Sarah's face twisted with fury. "You would place a servant above all royal daughters, above tradition, above your bloodline." Alaric's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I will not place duty above truth. If the goddess chose her, then I will honor that choice. Whether my court approves or rebels does not matter. The line of succession matters little if the kingdom falls without balance." The whisper of disbelief spread across the hall. Lyria felt a flicker of fear. She was not a princess. She was a servant, a girl with nothing. And yet the king's words felt like an anchor, steadying the storm inside her. "Alaric," she said softly, "I never sought this. I cannot give heirs. I cannot even claim the title they whisper about. If you accept me—" Her voice caught, trembling under the weight of truth. "You must accept all of it, all. The flaws, the fears, and the mark that binds us both." The king studied her, eyes narrowing, searching the depths of her soul. "You ask me to accept what even I do not fully understand," he said slowly. "Yet I see it. The mark does not lie. It burns with purpose. I feel it even as I speak to you." Lyria's breath caught. The invisible tether between them pulsed, faint yet insistent, a rhythm she had come to recognize as his own. Alaric turned to the council. "The Luna of Ilarion is not chosen by nobility, nor by lineage. She is chosen by the moon itself. Those who oppose this choice shall see that resistance brings ruin, not triumph." Sarah's fury boiled, but no words came. Even the elders seemed hesitant to challenge him further. Alaric returned his gaze to Lyria. "I choose you," he said, voice unwavering. "Not because I am commanded, not because prophecy dictates it, but because the goddess has marked you, and I see what she sees. Ilarion's balance, and my own, depends on your strength, your courage, and your heart." Tears blurred Lyria's vision. Relief, fear, and something fragile called hope tangled within her chest. "I will not fail," she whispered. "You cannot," he said, "and if you survive, together we will guide this kingdom beyond the shadows that haunt it." The hall erupted in murmurs, some reverent, some incredulous. Yet Alaric remained focused on her, the tension between duty and destiny settling like a mantle upon his shoulders. Lyria took a hesitant step forward. The glow of her mark intensified, as though the moon itself approved, as though the power and responsibility of centuries past now rested in her palm. Alaric extended his hand. "Do you accept what lies ahead?" Her fingers closed around his, firm despite trembling. "I do," she said, voice steady. For a fleeting moment, silence reigned again, and then the murmurs of the nobles and priests began to swell, not in opposition, but in recognition. The king had spoken. The bond was sealed. Above, the moon shone brighter than ever, casting its silver light upon the mark that had survived fire, doubt, and fear, and Ilarion held its breath waiting for the dawn of a new era. The days following the king's choice were uneasy. Rumors moved like wildfire through the streets of Ilarion. Some whispered admiration for the courage of the servant-turned-Luna. Others muttered about the king's folly, claiming the moon had forsaken them. Merchants eyed the castle with suspicion. Soldiers tightened their grip on swords they did not wish to wield. Lyria moved through the castle with careful steps, aware that eyes followed her every move. Her hands bore the faint burn of her mark, now a quiet pulse beneath her skin. Each glow reminded her that the bond with Alaric was no longer invisible. It tethered their fates together, and the consequences were more than personal. Alaric summoned her to the council chambers early one morning. The room smelled of damp stone and ink, the scrolls of old treaties spread across tables. Eldrin waited beside her, silent but watchful. "The northern lords have grown restless," Alaric said without preamble. His tone held the weight of command, but also of uncertainty. "They question my decision. claiming that Ilarion cannot be led by a Luna who cannot bear heirs. Some whisper that we invite war if we persist. Lyria swallowed. War? Over me? Alaric's gaze sharpened. Not you alone. Over what your mark represents. The moon's choice, the defiance of tradition, the balance of power. They see weakness where there is strength. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of the map that marked borders and holdings. Then we must show them strength. He nodded, expression tightening. Yes, but words and soldiers alone will not be enough. The Northern Lords test loyalty and courage, and they will not respect what they cannot understand. Eldrin whispered from her side. The bond can help. The king's instinct, your insight, together, you can counter them before their whispers turn to blades. Lyria felt the familiar pulse in her hand, a rhythm that matched Alaric's own heartbeat. It was not merely connection, it was guidance. She closed her eyes briefly, sensing the kingdom through him, anxious, uncertain, yet ready to follow courage if it led them. Prepare yourself, Alaric said. Soon emissaries from the north will arrive. They will test me and by extension you. If we falter, Ilarion risks unrest. If we endure, we can unite the realm under the moon's true will. Lyria's stomach twisted. She was no warrior, no diplomat. She was a girl with a mark and a destiny she barely understood, yet she felt the bond thrum stronger, urging her forward. Then I will not falter, she said quietly. Whatever comes, we face it together. Alaric's eyes softened for an instant. Do not underestimate what they can do, and do not forget who you are. Fear has its place, but it must not rule you. The first emissaries arrived by mid-morning, a delegation of armored men and stern-faced women, bearing messages wrapped in the seals of distant lords. Their leader, a tall man with silver streaks in his hair, bowed low but with eyes that dared defiance. King Alaric, he said, voice formal and cold, we have heard of your Luna. We come to witness the truth of her claim. The moon chooses, yes, but we will see if Ilarion survives your choice. Alaric's gaze swept the chamber, landing finally on Lyria. Observe, he said, for the strength of the kingdom is not measured by birth alone, but by courage and heart. Lyria felt the weight of those words settle upon her like armor. She straightened, her mark glowing faintly, and met the emissary's gaze without flinching. Every whisper of doubt, every murmured threat from the Northern Lords was met by her presence, quiet, resolute, and unshakable. The hall seemed to hold its breath. The first test of loyalty, courage, and destiny had begun, and far above the moon hung pale and vigilant, as if counting the cost of each choice made in its name. The castle was unusually quiet that evening. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before the towers, holding its breath as though aware of the tension inside. Lyria stood at the edge of the balcony, watching the horizon darken. The Northern Lord's emissaries had returned to their lands, but their presence left a shadow over Ilarion. The mark on her hand pulsed faintly, almost as if warning her that peace was only temporary. Eldrin approached quietly, holding a small vial of herbs and murmuring prayers under his breath. Lyria, he said, voice low, something stirs. The moon's light flickers, unusually. I've felt it all day. She turned, sensing the unease in his tone. What do you mean? The bond, he explained. It's unsteady. The king's will falters, and your connection reacts. The moon, it tests the strength of your unity. If you fail, the consequences may be catastrophic. Her pulse quickened. Catastrophic how? He hesitated. I cannot be certain. But the prophecy warns that if the Luna falters, the kingdom itself suffers. Droughts, unrest, illness, even strife between the king and those who serve him. The curse of imbalance awakens when the bond is weak. Lyria clenched her fists. Then we must not falter. Before Eldrin could respond, the High Priestess Mara entered. Her veil, now lifted completely, revealed eyes sharpened by fear and calculation. Majesty, she said, addressing Alaric, who had just appeared behind Lyria, the moon has sent a warning. The Luna's bond is unstable. You must intervene, or Ilarion risks ruin. Alaric stepped forward, his presence both commanding and weary. Explain yourself, Mara. "The goddess does not err," she said, her voice firm. "But mortals do. Your bond is not yet strong. The Luna cannot carry the weight alone. Her spirit is tested, her courage stretched. If she fails, the curse awakens fully, and no mortal hand can undo what the moon allows." Lyria felt the burn beneath her sleeve intensify, an invisible tension pressing against her chest. She swallowed, fear and determination colliding. "What must I do?" "You must face the rite of renewal," Mara said. "Only by enduring it can the bond stabilize. Only by embracing the trial can you prevent the curse from spreading." Alaric's gaze softened. "And if she cannot?" "Then Ilarion may not survive," Mara replied, her voice unwavering. The weight of those words pressed down on her. Lyria turned to the king. "I will do it," she said firmly. "Whatever the moon demands, whatever the fire, I will endure. For you, for the kingdom, for the bond." Alaric's eyes darkened with both admiration and worry. "The trial is not only for the bond," he said. "It is for us. If you falter, the consequences touch both our fates." "I trust you, Lyria, but this is more than your strength alone." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then we endure together." Eldrin stepped closer, pressing the vial into her hand. "For the nights when the burn becomes too much," he whispered. "It will not save you from the trial, but it will let you survive its pain." Night fell, thick and heavy. The moon hung pale in the sky, casting a ghostly glow over the castle and courtyard below. Lyria felt the pull of the mark, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat and the king's. Its glow strengthened, warning and guiding her at once. The high priestess moved aside, motioning to the inner chamber where the rite of renewal would begin. The air seemed alive with expectation, charged with the promise of trial and the threat of the curse. Lyria inhaled, steadying herself. "Then let the moon see that we are ready," she said, voice firm despite the fear trembling in her chest. Alaric extended his hand. "We face it together," he said. Their fingers met, the pulse of the bond flaring like a living flame between them. Above, the moon watched, pale and unwavering, as if weighing the courage of one servant against the fate of an entire kingdom. And the curse stirred, restless and patient, waiting to see whether it would claim its due or be held at bay. The night was impossibly still, as though Ilarion itself held its breath. Lyria stood at the threshold of the inner chamber, the rite of renewal looming before her like a challenge from the moon itself. Her palms burned faintly, the mark glowing with a rhythm that matched Alaric's heartbeat. Every pulse seemed to whisper warnings she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Alaric's hand brushed hers. "You do not face this alone," he said, voice low but firm. "Whatever comes, I am with you. Our bond, the one the moon has sealed, will guide us." She swallowed, nodding. "I feel it," she admitted, voice trembling. "But it terrifies me." "Fear is natural," Alaric replied. "It does not make you weak. It makes you alive." Eldrin stepped forward, placing a small satchel at her feet. "Herbs, water, and words of old protection. They will not keep you from the trial, but they may let you endure its pain." Lyria nodded again, taking the satchel, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing into her chest. She was not just a servant. She was not just marked. She was the balance Ilarion needed, the living anchor for a kingdom that had grown fragile beneath centuries of tradition and fear. The High Priestess Mara motioned her forward. "Enter," she said, voice resonant and cold. "The moon judges. Your courage will be tested. Your soul will be weighed." Lyria stepped into the chamber. Flames erupted in a circle around her, not consuming, but dancing in luminous blues and silver, flickering in patterns that seemed alive. The heat washed over her, but did not burn. Instead, it seemed to hum with expectation, responding to the presence of the Luna, seeking her courage and resolve. Her vision blurred. Shadows of past Lunas appeared, women who had endured fire, betrayal, and sorrow. Their eyes met hers with quiet demand. "Carry this burden, do not falter." The chamber shifted. The flames formed shapes of animals, warriors and kings, testing her perception. A wall of fire advanced, then retreated. A spiral of moonlight encircled her and vanished. Every motion was designed to confuse, frighten, and isolate. Yet beneath it all, she felt the pulse of Alaric's presence, tethered through the invisible bond. It steadied her. With each step she took, the mark flared brighter, illuminating her path as though the moon herself approved her courage. A whisper echoed, the voice of the goddess through the chamber itself. "Choose not for yourself. Choose for what must endure." Lyria closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of her heartbeat match the mark's pulse. She drew in a slow, steady breath and said aloud, "I accept, not for glory, not for power, for him, for the kingdom, for all who cannot stand." The flames reacted instantly. They shimmered, softened, then withdrew to a gentle glow at the edge of the circle. A sense of warmth washed over her, more profound than any fire. Her limbs tingled with exhaustion, yet strength remained. A strength born not of the body, but of spirit and determination. The high priestess stepped forward, veil lifted completely. "The moon sees your courage," she said, voice carrying awe that even she did not conceal. "The Luna is true, the bond is preserved, the kingdom's balance endures." Lyria's knees nearly buckled. Relief, exhaustion, and triumph flooded her all at once. Eldrin and the king stepped close, their eyes reflecting pride, fear, and something ineffable, a recognition that the trial had changed everything, yet preserved all that mattered. Alaric's fingers brushed her cheek. "You have endured," he said softly, "and in doing so you have given us all hope." Lyria looked at him, the pulse of her mark steady now, harmonious with his heartbeat. "Then let this hope guide us," she whispered. The moon outside hung pale and luminous, bathing the chamber in silver. For the first time in decades, Ilarion felt its presence, not as judge but as witness, and somewhere far above the goddess's voice whispered in the wind, "The bond is complete, the trial is over, the kingdom may breathe." Morning arrived slowly over Ilarion, pale light creeping across the towers and the surrounding lands. The night had been long, and the kingdom exhaled in silence, as if the very stones were recovering from tension too heavy to measure. Lyria stood at the balcony, her mark dim yet steady, a heartbeat of silver beneath her skin. She had endured the trial, survived the rite of renewal, and yet her chest still ached with exhaustion and anticipation. Alaric approached from behind, his steps quiet on the cold stone. "You did not falter," he said softly. "The moon's trial is harsh, and yet you emerged stronger than even I could have imagined." Lyria turned, meeting his gaze. "I could not have done it without your presence, without the bond. Every pulse of it guided me, even through the fear." He smiled faintly, though worry still lingered in his dark eyes. "The kingdom watches, and they will test us both. The northern lords, the council, even those who claim loyalty, they will question what has changed. You must rest, and yet prepare. The mark will not fade, and neither will its demands." Eldrin arrived then, carrying herbs and warm cloths. His eyes, tired but bright with relief, rested on Lyria. "You've done what none before have," he said. "The bond is stronger now, and the curse, if it still stirs, will no longer hold sway over the kingdom." Her fingers traced the mark, absent-mindedly. "It feels lighter," she said. "As though the weight has shifted, shared." "Yes," Eldrin confirmed. "The king and you are tethered now. Whatever happens, the fate of Ilarion rests between the two of you. Together you have balanced what once teetered on ruin." Alaric placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. "This balance is fragile. Even with the bond, the choices we make now echo further than either of us can see. The path ahead will demand courage, wisdom, and patience." Lyria nodded, her eyes scanning the courtyard below where guards patrolled and servants moved carefully, aware that the kingdom had shifted subtly around them. The whispers of the people had changed. They no longer feared but hesitated, as if sensing that a new order had been forged, one that even the noblest could not ignore. "The northern lords have not yet accepted it," she murmured. "They will," Alaric said quietly, "if we show them the strength and the purpose of this bond. The moon chose, and now it guides both our hands." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and early blooms. Lyria felt something she had not felt before. Hope, not the fragile kind, but the steady flame of understanding that she was no longer alone. Eldrin stepped forward, pressing a hand against her arm. "The world is different now," he said. "The bond has endured fire, doubt, and fear. If it survives that, it can withstand anything else." Lyria took a deep breath, letting the words settle. "Then let this be the start of what we must protect," she said. "The kingdom, the people, and each other." Alaric's fingers intertwined with hers. "Together," he confirmed. "Whatever comes, we face it as one. The moon has chosen, and now we must honor that choice, not with fear, but with courage." From above, the sun crept fully over the horizon, gilding the castle in gold. The mark pulsed faintly on Lyria's palm, a quiet rhythm of promise and vigilance. The kingdom beneath them stirred, alive with the first light of a day that felt different, as though the world itself had exhaled relief. For the first time in decades, Ilarian's future felt possible. Not guaranteed, but within reach, carried on the courage of a servant who became Luna, and a king who dared to see the truth beyond tradition. And above, the moon lingered faintly, a witness to a bond that had survived fire, fear, and darkness, ready to guide them through whatever lay ahead. Years had passed since the moon chose Lyria, and the kingdom of Ilarion had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The streets hummed with life, markets thrived, and the nobles had slowly learned to temper pride with respect. Yet through all the flourishing, one story endured above all others: the tale of the barren Luna, the servant girl who became the soul of the kingdom. Lyria stood once more on the balcony of the highest tower, older now, her hands unmarked by fire but still carrying the weight of her choices. Alaric's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, the bond between them steady, enduring, a rhythm that had shaped the lives of countless citizens without their knowing. "You've changed the kingdom," he said softly, eyes scanning the streets below. "And not through bloodlines, but through courage and wisdom." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I only did what was necessary. The moon guided me, and you stood beside me. The rest is history written by those who survived it." "Survived, yes," Alaric said, turning to face her. "But more than that, they remember it. The people speak of you not as a servant or a Luna, but as a symbol, a reminder that the impossible can endure, that courage and heart outweigh birthright." Lyria traced the edge of the balcony. The wind carried the faint scent of spring blooms from the gardens below. "And yet," she whispered, "some will still whisper that I was unworthy, that tradition was broken." Alaric smiled, warm and steady. "Let them whisper. The truth is stronger than gossip. You passed trials that fire, fear, and prophecy could not undo, that cannot be erased by jealousy or ignorance." From below, children played in the sunlight, their laughter echoing through the courtyard. Servants who had grown old alongside the royal household moved quietly among the people, carrying on the rhythms of daily life, unaware of the depth of courage they passed by each day. Eldrin, still alive and wiser, walked among them, a gentle smile on his face as he tended to small needs, never claiming recognition for what he had helped preserve. Lyria's gaze turned to the distant mountains, where the Northern Lord's banners now flew in tentative alliance, their opposition softened over the years by the unshakable balance she had helped establish. "We've done it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "We've kept the kingdom whole." Alaric squeezed her shoulder. "And yet, the story will continue. Children will grow up hearing your name. Scholars will debate your deeds. Artists will paint your courage. That is the legacy of the barren Luna." She allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in years, letting the sunlight wash over her. "I only hope they remember the lessons, not just the legend." "They will," Alaric said with quiet certainty, "because the moon's choice was not merely for power or ceremony. It was to change hearts, to show that strength comes in unexpected forms, that the fate of a kingdom can rest in the hands of someone who seemed insignificant, yet held everything in her soul." Lyria smiled, a serene, tempered smile. "Then the moon has done well." Alaric nodded, his gaze steady on the horizon. "And so have we. Ilarion will continue to flourish. And whenever doubt arises, whenever fear or tradition threatens to overwhelm, people will remember. Even a servant can shape the destiny of a kingdom when courage and love guide her. The moon rose that evening, pale and gentle, its light reflecting on the castle walls, bathing the kingdom in silver. In its glow, the mark that had once burned so fiercely now lived only in memory, its lessons carried forward by a woman who had become more than a Luna. She had become a legend. Children whispered the story in villages, travelers spoke of it in distant towns, and even the noblest bowed in private to the memory of the servant who had faced fire, prophecy, and doubt to become the heart of Ilarion. Lyria turned to Alaric, their hands entwined. "It is finished," she said softly. "For now," he replied, "but the legend, it will endure." And high above, the moon smiled, its silver light shining on a kingdom forever changed by the courage of the barren Luna.